Colonel Leslie R. Groves, 46 years old and one of the oldest officers of this rank in the U.S. Army, was in a great mood. 20 years after graduating from West Point as fourth in his year, he finally had the chance to prove himself on the battlefield. He had just been offered the command of a combat unit after working as an engineer at a base in Washington. The next day, September 17, 1942, he learned that Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson had selected him for an important position and that President Roosevelt had approved the choice. The colonel, whose weight fluctuated between 125 and 150 kilograms, asked, "Where?" "In Washington," was the answer. Groves was shocked. It seemed that the stars he had been so eagerly striving for had gone out. Soon he was informed that he would be in charge of the atomic bomb project, codenamed Manhattan Project. The news that he was being considered for promotion to the rank of brigadier general was of little comfort. It meant the end of his dream of leading troops into battle. General Groves, the son of a Presbyterian minister who began his career as a chaplain, was gruff, outspoken and considered arrogant by many of his acquaintances. Colonel Kenneth D. Nichols, who served with Groves in Nicaragua, described him as the biggest son of a bitch I've ever met. It was precisely this kind of person that President Roosevelt and Secretary Stimson were looking for to revive the sluggish work on the atomic bomb. Even those who disliked Groves considered him a man who did not give in to adversity and a workaholic. If Groves was overwhelmed when he learned the details of what could become the greatest engineering project in history, he did not show it. Perhaps no one had ever been under such enormous pressure as Groves. If the mission is successful, it will shorten the world war and save many lives. If Hitler wins the secret nuclear race, he will destroy the entire world, including the United States. Groves' debut among political personalities took place less than a week after he received his stars as a brigadier general. He attended a conference in Stimson's huge, prestigious office in Washington, D.C. Also present were Chief of Staff George C. Marshall, two Nobel Prize-winning physicists who played a key role in the atomic project, and Lieutenant General Brian B. Somerville, a logistics genius who directed all support services and recommended Groves for the job. After the conference had been going on for hours, Groves got up from his chair, looked at his watch and asked, "Will you gentlemen excuse me? I should leave, even though you haven't finished your talk. I don't want to miss my train to Tennessee." This was a serious breach of the unwritten rules. The senior officers at the conference did not stand up and accept his excuse. There was a moment of silence. Groves left. The next morning, in the small sleepy town of Oak Ridge, Groves issued an order allowing the construction of uranium purification facilities, which would eventually employ more than 8,000 people. The construction of this huge and important complex had been delayed for many months due to indecision and confusion. Then the new boss got on a train and returned to Washington. A few hours later, he was at the Pentagon and went to see General Somerville. The general smiled broadly at him and said that Stimson had been impressed by his sudden departure. "But you really hit them hard," Somerville exclaimed. "I told them that when you get going, things will really move forward." Almost from the moment he took office, Groves emphasized the importance of secrecy. "Silence is the golden rule," he emphasized. A group of agents known as the Creeps worked to achieve this goal. Groves chose 31-year-old Colonel John Lansdale Jr., a Harvard University law graduate, to command them. Lansdale brought knowledge, a sharp mind and extraordinary vitality to a task that he critically viewed as dirty. At Oak Ridge and many other sites associated with the Manhattan Project, Lansdale and his assistant, Major William A. Considine, launched the most secret campaign in history, under General Groves' slogan, "Guarding the Project." Creeps, a unit of young men and women, consisted mainly of lawyers trained in security matters by the War Department. Others came from military counterintelligence and military police. To protect against spies and enemy bombers, or even the long-range rockets that Germany was known to have, Groves scattered the project centers. They were in Oak Ridge, Hanford, Washington, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and other locations. The scientists at the centers were strictly forbidden from using terms such as atom, uranium, heavy water, secret weapon. If a problem needed to be discussed, atoms were called peaks, and the bomb was called a boat. Losing a document related to the Manhattan Project was not an option. Even if it took a week or a month, the document had to be found. Even used carbon paper was cataloged, given a signature, and carefully stored in a special room. Every night, when the scientists and staff went home, the Creeps systematically checked the offices, looking for papers that had been left behind or desks that had not been locked. On one occasion, Colonel Lansdale put on civilian clothes, went to Berkeley, where top-secret experiments were being conducted at the University of California, and easily explored the laboratories. After introducing himself to Dr. James B. Conant, the director of the Office of Research and Development, as a research consultant, he tricked several scientists into showing him the new cyclotron and telling him about the work currently being done at the University of Chicago. After 2 days, the scientists were gathered and Lansdale, in his military uniform, told them what he had learned about the secret work. "I could have been a spy," he said. The ruse had the desired effect. Security was significantly strengthened. In Washington, President Roosevelt received regular written reports, but the documents for the Oval Office were brought by Secretary of War Henry Stimson, who watched the president read them and then took them back. The scientists gave the creeps a headache. Many of them had an overactive temperament and an inflated sense of self-importance. They resented being constantly watched by Lansdale's people. The creeps spent tens of thousands of hours eavesdropping on phone calls, opening letters, and gathering details about extramarital affairs, homosexual tendencies, alcoholism, and political orientation. The defense against espionage was particularly intense in Los Alamos, an atomic laboratory in the middle of the New Mexico desert, where 6,000 scientists, technicians, their wives and children lived behind a high, wired fence. Senior scientists, including many Nobel Prize winners, were assigned personal protection and false identities. Driver's licenses were marked with numbers instead of names. Mail came and went from P.O. Box 1663 in Santa Fe. The creeps, sent to Santa Fe, were instructed to visit bars and other public places and spread false stories about the project. Agents were placed in hotels in the city as staff. Most of the scholars were discreet, but on several occasions the security guards panicked. During a university lecture, one of them revealed top-secret information. Another left a briefcase with important information on a train. 6 agents worked day and night until they found it, with the contents intact. But hadn't the enemy spies photographed the documents? Many scientists loved to tease the security guards like children. One of the physicists managed to open the steel safe in the Los Alamos archive and put a piece of paper on top of the priceless documents. The paper read, "Peekaboo." Colonel John Lansdale was not amused. The main target of the creeps was Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist who had been selected by General Groves as the scientific director of the Manhattan Project. For months, Lansdale played cat and mouse with Oppenheimer because of his former connections to a group of communists, his financial support of extreme left-wing activities, and his friendship with communist agitators. Groves personally questioned Oppenheimer and was convinced that the man he called his closest, irreplaceable colleague had long since broken with his communist past. He ordered the creeps to stop following the research manager. Lansdale ignored the order and continued the surveillance. Lansdale and the creeps also took an interest in his vivacious, hard-drinking wife, Catherine, whom Robert had met in 1939 when he was a professor and she was an assistant in the biology department at the University of California. Kitty, as she was called by her friends, had connections to the communists. Her second husband, a Dartmouth graduate and son of a wealthy banker, organized communist unions and died fighting in the Abraham Lincoln Communist Brigade during the Spanish Civil War. During this marriage, Kitty, whose IQ was 196, transcribed letters for the Communist Party while living in luxury in Youngstown, Ohio. From the point of view of the creeps, Kitty's honesty and openness were particularly interesting. Sitting on the floor, clutching a bottle of whiskey, she told a casual acquaintance that she had deliberately become pregnant with Oppenheimer during her third marriage so that he could marry her. The divorce and fourth wedding took place on the same day in Nevada, and the son was born a few weeks later. If a very drunk Kitty tells such intimate secrets to a stranger, Colonel Lansdale thought, will she keep quiet about Oppenheimer's work? And did she know about the nature of his activities? Her learned husband told Lansdale that his wife knew nothing about his role at Los Alamos. But, meanwhile, in Washington, Lieutenant Colonel Boris T. Pash, head of the counterintelligence unit, suggested to Pentagon commanders that although the Communist Party had officially accepted Oppenheimer's departure, this could be a smokescreen. It is possible that Oppenheimer will continue his scientific work and then hand over the results to the Communist Party, perhaps through intermediaries, Pash wrote. He believed that Oppenheimer should be completely removed from the Manhattan Project and dismissed from his work for the U.S. government. General Groves respected Pasha. However, in this case, he rejected the accusations, relying on his own judgment. Besides, the head of the Manhattan Project, stated that he needed a scientific manager.